All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making time and space today to come to your mat. So my name is Angelina and I'm going to be leading you through a 60-minute yin practice. So the props that we'll be using today, 2 blocks. If for some reason you don't have blocks, you can always use 2 big books. The Harry Potter books are really good for this. And then 2 blankets. And if you don't have specific yoga blankets at home, you can also use a towel or just any blanket from your bed will also work. So we're going to get started in a seated position, either in a saddle pose or an easy seated pose. So if you'll grab your block, those of you who are coming to saddle, and you can even bring one blanket over the block to help have some padding for your ankles and your knees. And just going to bring the hips onto the block with the knees and the ankles folded underneath you. Now, if you have tension in the knees or tension in the ankles today, instead what you're going to do is come to an easy seated pose, and you'll see Philip's doing that version. So that would be just sitting right at the edge of the blanket, and no matter which version you're in, we're all going to try to bring the spine nice and tall. It's almost like there was that invisible cord pulling the head up and the shoulders relaxed. And let's bring the palms onto the knees for a few breaths. And this helps us to ground our energy down. And we'll take a few cleansing breaths here just to allow ourselves to fully arrive, letting the day we came from fade away, and committing to be completely present right here for the next 60 minutes. So to help us do that, let's take a big inhale in through the nose. Open the mouth, let it go. And let that release be a nice big release, a H-A sound. Let's do that again. A big inhale, inhaling all the way up the spine. Hold at the top. Open the mouth, let it go. Big inhale, take in wherever it was you just came from, whatever it was you were doing before you arrived at the mat. Hold that in the body. And now let it go. Another great big inhale all the way up the spine. Whatever it is you have to do after this class, take that into the body. And now let that go. And one more cleansing breath. Any other thoughts that are still stuck in the mind, stuck in the heart, stuck in the body, hold that at the top. Open mouth, release. And now we're going to start to become present with our Ujjayi breath. And that's done by inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the nose, creating a very soft whisper at the back of the throat. In through the nose, out through the nose. And we use this breath in our practice to help us find stability when our poses become challenging. We use this breath to help us transition from pose to pose with ease. In through the nose, out through the nose. And we use this breath to help calm the mind, which in turn will help calm the body. So we'll take a few more rounds here in stillness before we move into our first hold, but we really commit to stay present with this breath through the length of our practice today, making our breath our primary focus and our poses secondary. A few more rounds. In through the nose, out through the nose. Let's take one more cleansing breath right here. So on your next inhale, be getting that breath from deep at the edge of the spine, all the way up the spinal cord through the crown of the head. Hold. Open the mouth, let it go. And we'll gently begin to transition onto the back. So if you're on the block or the blanket, slowly lift the hips. Then move your props to the side, and we'll gently make our way to our back. Now just have your props where you can easily grab them. We'll be using them through our next couple of poses. And we'll start to come to the back, connecting the spine to the mat. And we'll begin to bring the knees in and take a few gentle rocks side to side. Just really easy. Starting to get blood flow through the body, through the low back and the hips. And then on our next exhale, let's release the arms out to the side. We'll take a big inhale, and then exhale, we'll release both knees over towards the right side of the mat. So letting both knees fall over to the right side of the mat for a very easy twist. And connecting this pose with the breath. Inhale, feeling the spine lengthen. Exhale, feeling the knees drop in a little bit more. Just finding some easy movement in the spine. So we spend a big part of our day compressing the spine. Being leaned over perhaps a desk, a laptop, a phone, our steering wheel while we're driving. So anytime we come to our mat, we're looking to lengthen the spine and decompress it. Take a few more rounds of breath here. And so our yin practice is much different from our yang practice. So when we think about that yin and the yang symbol, think about those polarities that balance one another out. So we live most of our life in a yang type of world. It's fiery, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of production, there's a lot of thinking involved. So we need to balance that out, and that's what our yin practice is for. To help us bring more coolness, more stillness. On our next inhale, let's bring those knees back to the center, a few rocks side to side. Just very gently and bringing some attention to noticing perhaps how the left hip feels a little different than the right hip. And then on our next exhale, let's release the knees and gently let them fall towards the left side of the mat. Inhale, lengthening the spine. Exhale, deepening the twist. So our yin practice operates on 3 principles. And the first principle is finding your edge. So what that means is in each pose, we're going to look to find the edge. How deep can we go in the pose? But we're also doing this with mindfulness. We're also doing this in a way where we're pushing ourselves. We're feeling a little uncomfortable. We're feeling sensation. But we're also being mindful not to force ourselves into an injury or aggravate a previous injury. And that's where the breath and the presence really comes into play to help us know the difference. And the second principle is time. So in our yin class, we hold our poses for much longer than in our yang class, anywhere sometimes from 5 to 8 minutes. And so after we've committed to finding our edge and we've committed to time, our third principle and our third commitment is to stillness. And this, I think, well, for me anyways, is the hardest part of yin, to just stay still. We live most of our day in movement. Our thoughts are racing, our body's physically moving. So to devote time to be completely still can be difficult. That's where we're really going to use the breath to keep us present, to keep us still, to move us through this time in finding our edge and bringing about true healing to the body. On our next inhale, let's bring those knees back to center, arms wrap around the knees, few rocks side to side. And again, just noticing now, what does the right side feel like? What does the left side feel like? Hopefully there's a little bit more space, and we'll still begin to cultivate that space. And let's release the legs. The legs are going to come down long on the mat, and the arms are going to start to extend overhead. So if your props are behind you, you may need to adjust slightly, or if you're near a wall, you may need to adjust. So we're creating this length in the body. Arms are up, extended long, legs are down, extended long, and we're going to start to create this banana or crescent moon shape with the body. So we're going to commit to keeping both shoulders and both hips planted into the mat. And we're going to pick up the heels and start to scoot them over towards the right side of the mat. And then we're going to pick up the hands and start to inch them over towards the right side of the mat. And if you're on a hard surface, you can always place the blanket or a towel underneath the heels or the hands. So we're creating this nice length in the left side of the body. And let's also see if we can direct the breath up and down the body. So not only are we lengthening the physical body, but also lengthening our breath practice. Can we inhale into that smallest toe? Allow the breath to travel all the way up the side body, out through the tallest finger. And can our exhale travel the length of the body back down? And can we stay connected to the breath? Continuing to inhale through the nose and exhale through the nose as we maintain this length in the body. And you still finding that connection to the breath. You still staying committed to those principles, finding your edge, time, and stillness. And even though the body may be physically still, are the other parts of your being also still? So when we look at the body, we want to look at the whole body, the subtle body included, the body that we can't see. The mind, the heart, even the soul. And the mind's usually the first thing to run off the mat, especially when it feels challenged. If that happens, just be gentle, be kind about it, but compassionately invite your mind back to the mat. On our next inhale, we're gently going to bring the arms back to center. We'll gently bring the feet back to center and pause with the limbs in the center of the mat still extended. I want us to take 2 deep breaths here in observation of what this feels like. And at the end of your second breath, then we'll begin to gently switch sides. Both hands over towards the left side of the mat, both heels over towards the left side of the mat, creating that crescent moon or banana shape with the body. Finding that length on the right side body. And still finding this breath connection, lengthening out the breath, inhaling into that smallest toe, allowing the breath to travel all the way up the right side body and out through the tallest finger, and then back down again. So today in our poses, we're really going to be focusing on that stillness and on sitting in that sensation when we come out of a pose. So once we come out of every pose, our typical desire, our tendency is to want to move right away. We've been sitting in these poses for a long time, and we're going to want to counter it out right away. We're going to find a shape or a movement that was opposite of what we were just doing. And we will get there, but before we get there, I'm going to invite you to take 2 breaths. And in those 2 breaths, I want you to observe, to stay present in exactly how you feel, even if that feeling is extreme discomfort. Even if that feeling is anxiousness about wanting to move, can we just sit with that for 2 breaths before we respond? Continuing to direct that breath up and down the body. Allowing the ribs to expand out to the sides of the mat. Still staying present with that breath as the entire being still right here. In our next inhale, we'll gently bring the arms back to center, gently bring both feet back to center and pause. With the limbs still extended, we'll take those 2 mindful breaths in observation, maybe even in discomfort. And after your last full breath, we'll gently bring the arms back by our sides, and then you can find a counter pose, a shape with the body that just makes the most sense right now. I'll offer a suggestion, but feel free to do what is most intuitive for you at the time. So maybe bringing the knees in towards the chest and taking a few rocks side to side like we started at the beginning of class. And we'll just be a few breaths in our counter pose before we move into our next hold. But even in the counter poses, we're staying connected with the breath. We're still inviting the entire being to be present on the mat, inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the nose. And then we'll gently begin to rock front to back, very slowly, really making those points of connection along the spine until eventually we come up to seated. And when we come up to seated, we're going to grab our blanket or our towel. This is going to be used as padding for the knees because our next few poses will be on the knees. So we'll bring that to the center of the mat, and then we're going to bring the knees to the blanket. And we'll also grab our blocks if we need them for stability. We'll just have them close by where we can grab them if we need them. And we're going to come to some foot stretches. So we're going to start up high on the knees. Knees will be positioned right underneath the hips. And then we're going to begin to curl the toes underneath us. And this will be our starting position. And you're always invited to come back here to starting position. But what I want to invite you to do is to take 2 breaths before you return here. In just a few moments, it'll start to get more intense as we drop the hips down to the ankles. And your first inclination might be to pop right out of it. But again, before you do that, that's not disallowed, but take those 2 breaths, check in with yourself first. So on our next exhale, let's begin to drop the hips down to the ankles, and the toes are still curled underneath. If you need to for stability, you could always grab the blocks. And hands can come down to the thighs just to help ground you down a little bit more. and we're lengthening the spine. And just notice as the intensity builds in the feet, what that does to the mind. And suffering is definitely optional in this pose. That invitation is always there to come out if needed, but again, taking those 2 breaths to check in. And that 2-breath check-in helps you observe, am I just trying to escape an intense moment? Or am I truly hurting here? And we truly don't want pain or injury to occur. But can we also just sit through our discomfort? Can we use our breath to help us find peace in the body, peace in the mind, even though there's intensity building up? This pose is really great if you've suffered from plantar fasciitis at all. Any high impact activities, running, hiking, wearing crazy shoes, this pose really helps with that. But it is challenging, it is intense. We'll be here for about 5 more deep breaths. Suffering remains optional. You can always come out after you've taken your 2 breaths of check-in. One more full inhale. On our next exhale, we'll gently lift the hips. We're going to flip the toes and pause. Take those 2 breaths right here just to observe the discomfort, to sit with that desire to want to react but not. And after your next exhale, you'll find any movement you need. So that movement may be wiggling the toes, it might be reaching back and massaging the foot, or my favorite, coming to all fours and kicking the feet like an angry child would. Just find a little bit of more movement, a few more rounds of breath here before we move in to our next hold. So we're going to now stretch the tops of the feet. And this one we may need the blocks for balance, so have those close by. So now we're going to flip the feet. So tops of the feet are connected to the mat. So all toes are pressed into the mat. And we'll again position the knees right underneath the hips. And with the torso up high, this is our starting position that we're always invited to return to. We'll start to sink the hips back down onto the heels. And some of us will stay right here, maybe hands on the knees. Some of us may use the blocks or else just use our hands to support us and lift the knees off the mat. So it's a very subtle movement with the knees gently lifted, but I'm sure you can tell pretty soon that it becomes intense in the shins and in the tops of the feet. And the tops of the feet and the shins are not an area that get a lot of direct attention in our poses. This is one of the few poses that really target that area. And this stretch right here has been really helpful for me in avoiding or treating shin splints. And it's also really good for the feet. We do a lot of damage to our feet. We beat them up and don't give them a lot of care or love. And so if these foot stretches have been particularly intense for you, let that maybe be a sign or a message that the feet need a little bit more love and care. Suffering is still an option here, so if you need to, after taking your 2 breaths of observation, you can always bring the knees down or come back to our starting position. We've got about 10 more deep breaths. And even though the body may be intensifying, we still keep the mind still. And we still keep the breath soft. And even in this intense, fiery situation, can we find calm in the mind and calm in the body? And if we can do that today on our mat, can we do that tomorrow off our mat? On our next exhale, if the knees are lifted, we gently drop the knees. If the hips are connected to the heels, we'll gently lift the hips, and we'll take our 2 breaths in observation, in presence. And after your last exhale, you'll find the movement you need. Same options are there: quick foot massage, any movement of the toes, or kicking of the feet. We'll take a few more breaths in finding any movement we need before we set up for our next pose. So our next pose is going to be dragon. So we'll keep the blanket here to support the knees. We're definitely going to want to use our blocks for this next pose. So we're going to start to bring the right foot forward towards the right corner of the mat. It's almost in a lunge position, but our knee is not positioned right underneath the hip. It's a little bit further back. So if the knee is right underneath the hip, you could curl the toes, scoot the knee back, and then set it back down. And then we're going to grab our blocks and bring them to the inside of the foot. And we'll position the blocks underneath the wrists and the wrists underneath the shoulders. And we'll all start here with the spine nice and long, with the heart lifted towards the front of the mat. And this one will also start to intensify pretty quickly. So there's a few options here. We're all going to start with the blocks high and then maybe intensify it along the way, reminding ourselves that we're devoting time to each pose. So a few rounds of breath right here. Can we maintain softness in the shoulders, softness in the neck, softness in the mind? So if this is feeling very intense, you'll stay right here with the blocks high. If you need to experience more, then you can bring the blocks down to a lower level and perhaps even bringing the forearms onto the blocks. And these are just options. They're not ones you have to take, but really be mindful. Check in with yourself. Do you truly need more? Are you experiencing enough? Are you opting to not take the option because you're not working towards your edge? And the only one who'll know is you. Just be mindful. Be dedicated to your practice. Maintaining that softness in the shoulders, softness in the neck, softness in the mind. Might be experiencing quite a bit or quite enough right here. If you need more, we'll start to drop the knee out, coming out to the edge of the foot. So we're allowing the right knee to fall towards the right side of the mat, coming towards the right edge of the foot. And that'll get a little bit deeper into the groin, into the inner thigh, while continuing to stretch the quad and the hip flexor. And still finding that breath connection. We're going to take 10 more deep breaths. So if you found any more space, now's your opportunity to go a little deeper. If you wanted some of those adding on options, dropping down to the forearms, coming out to the edge of the foot, letting the knee fall over, but still maintaining integrity in your pose no matter where you are. Being honest about what you can do, practicing with the body that you have today. Not the body you had a year ago, not the body you would like to wake up with tomorrow. Maybe not even where you were yesterday, just exactly where you are today. So if that knee is dropped over in our next inhale, we're gently going to bring it back. Pause. If we're down on the forearms, we'll start to come back to the hands and pause. And then on our next exhale, we'll bring the knee back so both knees are together, and we'll come up high and take our 2 breaths right here in this sensation, in this discomfort, in this desire to move. We'll stay here. Full inhale and full exhale. And 1 more breath. And then we're going to move right into our other side. So starting to set up now on the left side, bringing the left foot towards the corner of the mat. Like positioning ourselves so we're in a lunge position with that back foot. And then we'll start to bring those blocks towards the inside of the foot. Blocks are underneath the wrists and wrists are underneath the shoulders. And just take these first few breaths to begin to open up the inner thigh, the groin, the hip. Really exploring what's going on this side of the body today. Just remembering and respecting that each side of the body is different. So not forcing this side to go to where the previous side went. Or maybe forcing it to go a little deeper or inviting it to go a little deeper if that's accessible today. As the intensity begins to build in the low body, can you invite yourself to soften something? The shoulders, the neck, the space between the eyebrows, the jaw, gently separate the teeth, or something that's not in the physical body, maybe in the subtle body. Soften the mind. Let go of tense thoughts that might be coming up. Soften the heart. Maybe just taking some time to check in with the soul. So option to stay with the hands right on the block at the tallest height, or maybe moving the block down. When you move the block down, it'll get you deeper into the hips, and then if you come down to the forearms, that'll get you in deeper even still. I'm just choosing the option that's best for this side of the body right now. And then option to stay exactly where you are. Or if you're finding that you need a little bit more, then dropping the left knee towards the left side of the mat, coming towards the left edge of the foot. And we'll take our last 10 breaths. If we found a little more space, then maybe we go a little deeper. Still staying very present with our 3 commitments to finding our edge, to time, and to stillness. And if that knee is fallen out on our next inhale, we'll bring it back. If we've come down to the forearms, we'll begin to come back to the hands. And pause. And then on our next exhale, we'll bring the knee back, both knees back together, coming up high, bringing the torso high. And we'll take our 2 breaths here to observe, to be in stillness. Really feel the pose. And after our last exhale, we'll start to come to a counter pose that we may need. So option is cat and cow pose. But if there's something else that the body is asking for, take some time to give it that. Maybe moving the hips side to side in cat and cow. Maybe lifting a leg and drawing circles with the knee may feel really good here. We'll be here for about 5 more breaths before moving to our next hold. Let's finish up the last bits of movement you need. Our next hold that we're coming to is our caterpillar pose. So we'll bring our blanket towards the back of the mat. And maybe we even fold it in half to give us some more length in the pelvis, with the tassels facing the back of the mat. And we're going to stretch our legs out long along the mat. And we'll grab our other blanket, or if you have a bolster at home, this would work too. And we're going to use this for support. So just depending how flexible you feel today in the hamstrings and in the spine, kind of depends on how much you need to fold the blanket. And you can also get additional height with the blocks if need be. So in our caterpillar pose, we're going to come to a long forward fold, attempting to bring the belly close to the thighs and the nose towards the knees and the forehead towards the shins. So on our next exhale, we'll start extending forward, belly a little closer to the thighs, nose a little closer to the knees, forehead a little closer to the shin. And we'll set up our blanket, our blocks, our bolster, whatever it is we have to help support us. And so we'll use our props to help us relax the shoulders, relax the head and neck. Just as that pillow, that assistance. And with each exhale, we're letting the belly reach a little closer to the thighs, extending down a little bit more. This is another really great pose for lengthening, decompressing the spine. And can we keep those shoulders soft, keeping the neck soft, and of course the mind soft. And still finding that breath connection. Inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the nose. We've got about 10 more deep breaths here. So if you found more space and would like to go a little bit deeper, then maybe you remove the prop or maybe you just unfold the blanket a little bit for less support. And that's just an option. If you're finding enough sensation, if you're still in your edge, then don't push it. Stay exactly where you are, continuing to work the breath right there. Head and neck will come up last. We'll very gently begin to bring the torso back upright. We'll relax the shoulders down and pause, taking our 2 breaths in stillness. And then after your second exhale, we'll find movement that we need. So a nice counter pose to this can be reverse tabletop, planting the feet and the hands on the mat with the knees bent, lifting the hips up and dropping the head back. Maybe you take that a few times, or again, if there's something that just makes more sense for you, take your time easing into that. I'm just really honoring that commitment that you've been making to take those 2 breaths before reacting. And I've been trying to do that more off the mat as well, just before a reaction. If something has aggravated me or stimulated me, can I take 2 breaths before I respond? Before I respond maybe to a coworker, maybe to an email, maybe to a text message. Just taking those 2 breaths has been transformative in the way I respond. Our next pose that we're going to come to is our swan, our sleeping swan. So this is a really deep pose for the hips, the hip flexors, and low back. So some of us are going to come in from the knees and some onto the back. I'm going to show you the option first of coming on from the knees. So I really like the blanket under the knees here and having all the props available. We'll start on the right side, bringing the right knee towards the corner of the mat. And we're working for the shin to be parallel with the front of the mat, but today that may not happen, so it's okay if the heel is closer towards the center. And the back leg is stretched out long. I really like to have a block right here underneath my right glute for support, and then maybe using a blanket or another block for support to extend down. So some of you will come in from this way. Some of you instead might want to come to the wall. And I really recommend this pose at the wall if you have knee or low back issues. So coming to the wall, you'll place both feet on the wall. So knees are bent in 90 degrees and both feet are on the wall. And you may need to start out with the hips scooted a little bit further away from the wall, really gently scooting further away. And then keeping the left foot on the mat, you'll lift up the right foot. So left foot stays on the wall, not the mat. And we'll bring the right ankle to the left knee. And then as we get deeper into the pose, the knee can come closer to the wall. And the closer you scoot the hips towards the wall, the deeper the pose will get. This is a really nice variation, especially for those with knees or low back problems. It still gets you deep into the hips, deep into the low back without aggravating those sensitive joints. And so if you're coming in from the back, from the knees, take as much propping as you need to. So you see she has the blanket underneath the knee for support, the block underneath the glute for support, and then you can even bring yourself as high as you may need to with the other blanket or with the bolster or block if you have that. And what can you soften here? The shoulders, the neck, the forehead, the jaw, the mind, the heart. I've got about 10 more deep breaths. If you found any more space, maybe you go a little deeper. If you're at the wall, you can move the hips a little closer to the wall, only if you need that increased sensation. The closer you get the hips to the wall, the more intense the pose will become. If you're at the wall, you're going to release the ankle off of the knee, bring both feet to the wall. If you came in from the knees, you're going to use your hands to slowly lift yourself up. And then begin to gently assist that knee back, coming back to all fours. About nice and slow. And we're just going to switch sides before we find our counter pose. So if you're at the wall, you're now going to bring the opposite foot to the knee. If you're coming in from the knees, then you'll bring the opposite knee forward. And go slow on this side. Again, remembering and respecting each side of the body is different. You may need additional propping here, maybe less propping. Find the support that you need and then begin to ease into the pose, either at the wall or from the knees. Allow yourself to continue to soften, continue to sink into the support of the props. Even though the intensity may be building in the hips and the low back, can you still stay soft amongst that intensity? Can you use the breath to help you find some ease, even amongst discomfort? I have 10 more deep breaths. If you'd like a little bit more, you can scoot the hips closer to the wall, or you can go a little lower in your pose, or to continue to just find peace exactly where you are. If you're at the wall, you'll gently release the foot off the knee, bring both feet back to the wall. If you're on the knees, then we'll use our hands to assist us to come up. Gently bring both knees back together, and we'll just pause for our 2 breaths. High on the torso, our pause at the wall. And at the end of our 2nd breath, we'll find the movement that we need. A really good pose after that long hold is downward facing dog. Or if you have something else that's making more sense for you, take your time there. Maybe lifting a leg and bending a knee. Just a few more breaths. This will be our last bit of movement before we come to some extended stillness. We're going to start to come to our legs up the wall pose. So there's 2 options here. So if you have a wall accessible, you'll bring your hips right up to the edge of the wall and extend the legs up the wall. If you don't have a wall easily accessible, you can grab a blanket or a block to bring underneath your hips and extend the legs up in the air. So some of us who don't have the wall close by, we'll grab our block with the knees bent. We'll press the feet into the mat, lift the hips up, slide the block right underneath, and then gently begin to lift the legs up. And you keep a nice bend in the knees here. That really helps the hamstrings. If you're fortunate enough to have the wall close by, then extend the legs up the wall, just allowing the wall to support and hold the legs. And you can open the arms out to the sides, really allowing yourself to ease in as we start to come towards the end of our practice. This is one of my favorite poses to come to before bed. Just to allow the mind to settle, the body to settle. And I'm going to read this passage from Bringing Yoga to Life by Donna Farhi. And Donna Farhi says, an important part of learning to channel our energies is increasing our tolerance for staying in the pause between desire and satisfaction. What might happen if we had the presence of mind and the wherewithal to really be in that pause and ask what would truly satisfy us? When we contain rather than constantly discharge our feeling state, we allow ourselves to feel completely. In feeling completely, we re-experience our aliveness and the source of that aliveness. When we cultivate the discipline to pause, it becomes possible for us to make a choice that is outside our normal habit pattern. It is in breaking through these entrained patterns that we begin to experience a more liberated state of being. Gradually, we become the freedom that we previously longed for. And we're going to start to make our way to our final resting pose, Savasana. So some of you might want to stay at the wall. Some of you may want to bring the legs down. So whatever feels better for you, come to a pose that you can stay in sustained stillness. So if you had the legs up in the air, then we'll remove the block very gently. And then we'll use our props any way we'd like, if we'd like. Maybe blanket under the knees, maybe blanket covering us if we got cold, or else maybe we just extend the legs out long down the mat. Find whatever it is you need to. Last few moments of shifting around, moving anything around, doing whatever it is we need to do to find complete stillness. And then we'll begin to relax and ease in to our final resting pose, Shavasana. So if you still need stillness, or if you have the time, stay longer in stillness. If you're ready for movement, gently wiggle fingers and toes. And begin to bend the right knee, begin to bend the left knee. We'll slowly roll over towards the right side of the mat. Bring the knees close to the chest in that fetal position for a few breaths. And begin to use our hands to assist us up to an easy, comfortable seated pose. So we're comfortable sitting, we'll bring the hands together at the heart, sealing in our practice. Let's take a big inhale in. Open the mouth, let it go. Thank you so much for devoting time to stillness today, for making yourself a priority and really exploring, extending that space between a stimulus and a reaction. With so much love and gratitude, I bow to you and say namaste. Namaste. Thank you, yogis.